"Grandma, can I stay home today?" I agreed to let my granddaughter Lily stay home, having no idea that single decision would be the very thing that saved our family. Because at midday, while I was upstairs, Lily witnessed the unbelievable. She saw her own father, my only son Michael, sneak into our house. Hiding behind a door, her heart pounding in her chest, she watched him slip a small bag of white powder into the pocket of my old wool cardigan. Before he left, she heard her father's voice, trembling over the phone. "It's done. Tonight, just make the call to the police. Just don't touch her." I was upstairs, completely unaware that my son had just gambled away my freedom to pay off a debt. I had no idea that everything I held dear was about to be ripped away, all because of a deadly lie hidden in my favorite sweater. My name is Joan Miller, a 66-year-old widow living in a quiet house in the suburbs of Chicago. The alarm clock blared at 6 in the morning, a sound as familiar as my own heartbeat. I never really needed it. An old woman's sleep is thin as a wisp, and my body, after 40 years of the iron discipline of a head nurse, was programmed to wake up before the sun even had a chance to peek over the rooftops of Naperville. But I still let the old clock, my husband Tom's clock, do its job. Hearing it ring each morning was like hearing his whisper from somewhere far away, a gentle reminder that a new day was beginning, and I had to live it for the both of us. I shut off the alarm, sat up in bed, and let my eyes drift across the bedroom, filled with the silvery gray light of a Chicago dawn. Everything was neat, tidy. The oak dresser that Tom had built with his own 2 hands, the stack of books on the nightstand, the wool blanket I had knitted during those long, cold winters. This wasn't just a room. It was a museum of my life, of our love. Every object held a story, a piece of a memory. Sometimes, I felt like I was living among cherished ghosts, and strangely, that brought me comfort. Making my way downstairs, the old oak steps creaked with each footfall, a melody I knew by heart. The air downstairs was cool, carrying the scents of the night before, the lemon from the floor cleaner, the smell of old wood and paper from the books in the living room. I went straight to the kitchen, the heart of this house, which always beat with a steady rhythm. The first ritual of the day, an unbreakable ceremony, making coffee. I opened the tin canister, scooped out 2 full spoonfuls of ground coffee, and that rich, earthy aroma filled the space, waking up every one of my senses. It was the smell of a new start, of clarity, of the promise of an ordinary day. While I waited for the coffee maker to hiss and drip the dark, rich liquid into the glass pot, I leaned against the counter, looking out at the backyard through the kitchen window. The morning dew still clung to the leaves of my tomato plants and the patch of basil I was so proud of. A few sparrows were hopping on the damp lawn, searching for their breakfast. It was a picture of perfect peace, a living, still life. It was for moments just like this that I loved this house so much. It wasn't just brick and mortar. It was where I had cultivated life, both in the garden and within these walls. It was where Tom and I had built a family, where my son Michael had taken his first breath, and now where my granddaughter Lily had found a safe harbor. The coffee was ready. I poured myself a full mug, the white ceramic one with the cobalt blue rim that Tom had loved best. The steam warmed my hands, which were beginning to show their age with a few liver spots. I sat down in my usual wooden chair at the kitchen table and took a sip. The strong, bitter taste spread through my mouth, a bitterness that was honest and straightforward. I never put sugar in my coffee. Life already had enough unexpected sweet and bitter flavors. I didn't feel the need to add any more. Sitting alone in the quiet kitchen, my mind began to drift, as it often did in the morning. I thought about Tom, about his kind smile and his steady hands. It had been 5 years since he'd been taken from me by a sudden heart attack, but the pain, it seemed, never truly went away. It just changed, transforming from a raw, open wound into a dull ache of a scar, one that would throb every now and then when the weather changed, or when a memory came rushing back uninvited. Then, I thought of Michael, my son. My heart sank a bit. Ever since his wife, Sarah, had passed away in a car accident 2 years ago, Michael seemed to have become someone else entirely. His smile no longer reached his eyes, which always seemed to hold a distant sadness and a weariness that sleep couldn't seem to touch. He'd lost weight, New lines had etched themselves around his eyes, and he'd started taking hushed phone calls, coming home late with no explanation. I had tried to ask, but he always brushed it off with a forced smile. "It's nothing, Mom, just work." But I knew better. A mother's intuition, much like a nurse's diagnostic skill, can sense the symptoms you can't see with the naked eye. There was some kind of sickness eating away at my son's soul, a tumor of despair that was growing larger by the day. And then I thought of Lily, my precious girl, the light of my life. She was only 15, but she had already endured so much loss. Losing her mother, and then, in a way, losing the father she once knew. She had come to live with me after Sarah died, and her presence had filled the silent spaces in this house, soothing my own loneliness. She was the spitting image of her mother, with the same chestnut hair and intelligent brown eyes, but she had my resilience. We had become a team, an alliance of two souls navigating the storm of grief together. The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 7 times, its deep, warm tones echoing through the house. It was time to get Lily up for school. I drained my coffee, placed the mug in the sink, and started up the stairs. The family photos hanging along the staircase wall watched me go. There was my wedding photo with Tom, both of us so young and full of hope. There was Michael, a chubby, blonde-haired boy grinning from ear to ear on his first tricycle. And here was the most recent one, taken last Christmas. Me, Michael, and Lily. I was smiling, and so was Lily. But Michael's smile looked strained, his eyes looking somewhere just past the camera, as if searching for an escape route. That picture always made me uneasy. I stopped in front of Lily's door and knocked gently. "Lily, honey? Time to get up for school." There was no immediate answer, just silence. I knocked again, a little louder this time. "Lily? Grandma." Her voice drifted from inside, faint and a little thick. "I don't feel so good." My heart tightened. I slowly opened the door and stepped inside. The room was dim, the curtains still drawn. Lily was curled up in bed under her sunflower print comforter, only her pale face visible. I walked over to the bed and sat on the edge. "What's wrong, my little angel?" I placed my hand on her forehead. No fever, her skin was cool and slightly clammy, a professional reflex. "My stomach," she whispered, her eyes still closed. "It's all twisted up." I observed her carefully. Her breathing was even, no signs of distress. Her lips weren't dry, no sign of dehydration. I gently pulled back the comforter and placed my warm palm on her belly. "Where does it hurt? Here?" I pressed lightly on her upper abdomen. She shook her head slightly. "Or here?" I moved my hand lower. Lily let out a soft groan. 40 years as a head nurse taught me what to look for. Appendicitis? No, the pain wasn't localized on her right side. Food poisoning? Possible, but she wasn't nauseous. "Did you eat anything unusual last night?" "No," Lily mumbled. "Just your roast chicken." Well, it couldn't be my roast chicken. I'd made that dish 1,000 times. I looked closely at my granddaughter's face, the pale skin, the slight shadows under her eyes. But there was something else, something no medical textbook could define. It was the tension in her brow, the way her lips were pressed tightly together, as if she were holding back not just a physical pain, but some kind of emotional distress. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, didn't look tired in the way a sick person's do. They held a flicker of anxiety, a vague fear she couldn't quite name. A grandmother's heart told me this pain wasn't coming from her stomach. It was coming from somewhere deeper. I'd seen this look in the eyes of patients about to receive bad news, in people facing major surgery. It was the look of profound unease. I stopped my diagnosis. Instead, I was simply a grandmother. I gently stroked her chestnut hair, pushing the stray strands away from her face. "All right, little angel," I said, my voice soft. "It's okay. You can stay home with me today. We'll watch an old movie, and I'll make you that chicken soup you love." A wave of relief washed over Lily's face. Her small body seemed to relax just a little. She nodded, a weak little nod. "Thanks, Grandma." "Of course, honey. You get some more sleep. Come downstairs whenever you feel up to it." I tucked the comforter back around her, placed a light kiss on her forehead, and quietly left the room, closing the door behind me. As I walked back down the stairs, My mind was a jumble of thoughts. I knew she wasn't really sick in the conventional sense. Maybe it was stress from school, or something with her friends. 15-year-olds have their own burdens to bear. But a small part of me, a tiny, whispering voice, sensed something bigger was going on. I decided to push those worries aside. The immediate task was to care for my granddaughter. I went to the kitchen, took out a fresh piece of ginger, and sliced a few thin pieces into a mug, pouring hot water over them. The sharp, spicy scent filled the air, a smell that always felt healing. I would bring some ginger tea up to Lily. It would help soothe her stomach, whatever the real cause of the pain might be. When I brought the tea up, Lily had already drifted off to sleep. I set it on her nightstand and quietly made my way back downstairs. The house was quiet again, with only the ticking of the grandfather clock as a witness to the passing time. I settled into the armchair in the living room, Tom's favorite chair, and looked out the window. The sky was still a silvery gray, promising an overcast day, a perfectly normal Thursday. After making sure Lily was resting comfortably, I went back to my daily chores. This house, even with just the two of us, always had 1,000 little things that needed tending to. It was like a living thing, needing to be dusted, tidied, and listened to for its little creaks and groans. Today, I decided to clean Tom's study upstairs, a place I still called his room, even though 5 years had passed since he'd last been in it. I stepped into the room, and a familiar feeling washed over me. The air in here always had a distinct smell of old books, of the pine from his desk, and a faint, lingering scent of ink. Everything was just as he had left it. The stack of World War II history books was still on the corner of his desk, his tortoiseshell reading glasses placed neatly beside them, as if he had just stepped out for a cup of coffee. I didn't keep the room this way out of weakness or an inability to let go. I kept it because it was a sanctuary, a tangible archive of the man he was. My job today was simple: dusting. I took a soft cloth and carefully wiped down each object. I ran my hand over the books, feeling the worn texture of their spines. I picked up our wedding photo and wiped the thin layer of dust from the glass. In the picture, I was 22, wearing a simple white lace dress, and Tom, in his well-fitted suit, was looking at me with an expression that held a whole universe of love and protection. We were so young then, so naive to the trials life would throw our way, but we had each other. That used to be all we needed. I placed the photo back in its spot, a gentle wave of nostalgia washing over me. I thought about Michael. Tom had been so proud of him. He always said Michael had my brains and his kind heart. But looking back now, I wondered if we had sheltered him too much. As an only child, Michael had always been the center of our world, the recipient of all our love and attention. Maybe we hadn't prepared him well enough to face the brutal failures of life. Sarah's death had broken him, and it seemed he didn't know how to pick up the pieces. He was drowning, and I, his own mother, didn't know what kind of life raft to throw him. I continued my work, wiping down the desk, straightening a few stacks of papers. My mind wandered, lost in a stream of memories and unanswered questions. The silence of the house enveloped me, a silence I had grown accustomed to. It was my constant companion in these years of widowhood. And that's why I didn't hear a thing. I didn't hear the key slide ever so softly into the front door lock, a sound made with the caution of someone who didn't want to be found. I didn't hear the door open and then close with an almost imperceptible click. Upstairs, lost in my own world, I was completely oblivious to the fact that the peace of my home had just been violated. But downstairs, Lily heard it. She wasn't really asleep. The vague anxiety had kept her in a state of light, fitful rest. She was lying on the sofa, her eyes closed but her ears tuned to every sound. And then she heard it, a sound that shouldn't have been there at this time of day. The softest little click from the front door. Her heart gave a jolt, pounding against her ribs. Grandma was upstairs. So who could it be? Her first and only thought, Dad. But why was her dad home in the middle of the day? And why was he being so secretive? An icy chill shot down Lily's spine. She didn't move a muscle, didn't even breathe. She cracked her eyes open, peeking towards the entryway. The door to the living room, where she was lying, was slightly ajar, creating a narrow slit just wide enough to see through. And then she saw him, her father, Michael. He stepped into the house, but this wasn't the father Lily knew. He didn't walk with his usual confident stride. He moved stealthily, his back slightly hunched, his eyes darting around the room as if he were afraid of his own shadow. His face was gaunt, his stubble patchy, and his eyes were red-rimmed and sunken from lack of sleep. He looked less like the owner of the house and more like a cornered animal. Lily shrank back behind the door, trying to make herself as small as possible. She watched her father walk directly to the oak coat closet near the door, where my everyday jackets hung. His hands were trembling as he ran them over the coats. Then he stopped at the old, moss-green wool cardigan, my favorite one, the one I always wore when I was gardening or taking a walk on a crisp autumn afternoon. It was soft, warm, and smelled of earth and plants, the smell of peace. Michael reached into the pocket of his own jacket. When he pulled his hand out, a tiny, clear plastic bag was pinched between his thin fingers. Inside was a white powder. Lily held her breath. Her whole body went rigid. She didn't know exactly what it was, but a terrible instinct told her. It was illegal, dangerous. With a quick, decisive movement, Michael shoved the small bag deep into the pocket of my wool cardigan. He even took a moment to pat it down, making sure it wouldn't easily fall out. When he was done, he took a step back, staring at the cardigan as if it were a monster. Then he pulled out his phone. He dialed a number from his contacts. He put the phone to his ear but didn't speak right away. He paced back and forth in the small entryway, like a caged tiger. The tension coming off him was so thick you could almost touch it. Upstairs, I had just finished wiping down the windowsill, watching dust motes dance in a sunbeam. I smiled, satisfied with my work. Downstairs, my son began to speak, his voice a whisper but perfectly clear in the silence of the house. And every word he spoke was caught by the young ears of my granddaughter, every word hammering a nail deep into her innocence. "It's done, Sandy," Michael said, his voice hoarse. He licked his dry lips. "It's in the pocket of the green wool cardigan. Yeah, the one she always wears to garden. No one would ever suspect." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. Lily could see the muscles in his jaw twitching. I know! His voice began to tremble, a tremor he couldn't hide. "The debt is up to $75,000 now. I know that better than anyone. Please, just tell him I need a little more time. Just a little!" The silence stretched on again, this time even more tense. Michael ran a hand over his face, his fingers digging into his messy hair. "No," he practically hissed, his voice filled with fear. "Don't you touch Lily. Do you hear me? Do not touch my daughter." Lily felt her chest constrict, as if an invisible hand were squeezing the air out of her. Her father was talking about her. Why would someone want to touch her? "I'm doing what you said," Michael continued, his voice now pleading. "Everything is going according to plan. Tonight, at 9 o'clock sharp, you make the anonymous call. The police will come. They'll find it. It'll be a clean bust." He listened again, nodding frantically. "Okay. The house is worth at least $450,000. After she's arrested, I'll have power of attorney and can sell it immediately. He'll get his money. We'll get our money. Just make sure no one hurts my little girl." He hung up. The abrupt silence that followed was even more terrifying than the words he had spoken. Michael stood frozen in the middle of the entryway for a few seconds, his shoulders slumped as if a great weight had been lifted, only to be replaced by another, more terrible one. He glanced around one last time, his eyes sweeping past the living room door where Lily was hiding. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he'd seen her. But no, his gaze was empty, vacant. Then, as stealthily as he had entered, he turned, opened the door, and was gone, leaving behind him a deathly silence and a 15-year-old heart shattered into a million pieces. When the front door clicked shut, its dry, final sound was like the starting gun for the end of one world and the beginning of another. For a few long, endless seconds, Lily remained frozen behind the living room door. Her entire body was stiff, not from fear, but from a shock so profound it had paralyzed every muscle, every nerve. Her father's words were still echoing in her head, a venomous recording on a loop that wouldn't stop. $75,000. Don't touch Lily. Tonight. 9 o'clock sharp. The police will find it. After she's arrested. Arrested? Grandma was going to be arrested? The thought was like a bucket of ice water poured directly onto Lily's fragile soul, jolting her out of her stupor. No, that could not happen. Grandma Joan, her strong, warm grandmother, the only rock she had left in her life, could not be put in handcuffs and taken away by the police. The image was too grotesque, too fundamentally wrong to even exist. And then, another emotion surged forward, overpowering the shock and the fear. It was rage, a pure, raw, and fierce anger that she had never felt before in her life. Anger at her father, the man who had once been her hero, the one who taught her how to ride a bike, who told her stories about the stars. Now, that hero had become a traitor, a monster willing to sacrifice his own mother. And anger at the faceless people on the other end of the phone, the ones who had pushed her father to this edge, the ones who had dared to use her name as a threat. No, she would not let this happen. Tears began to well up, hot and bitter, but Lily quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand. This wasn't the time for tears, it was time for action. With a decisiveness that surprised even herself, Lily gently pushed the door open and tiptoed out. The house was still. She could hear the steady ticking of the grandfather clock, a rhythm so normal it was almost insulting in this horribly abnormal situation. She could also hear the faint hum of the vacuum cleaner from upstairs. Grandma was still up there, safe in her own world, completely unaware of the conspiracy unfolding right under her feet. And Lily knew she had to keep her that way. She had to handle this herself. She walked to the coat closet, her heart beating so fast she could hear the thumping in her ears. She stared at the moss-green wool cardigan, which now looked like a coiled, venomous snake. Her hand trembled as she reached out, her fingers hesitating just before they touched the soft wool. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and plunged her hand into the pocket. Her fingers brushed against something small, hard, and cold. The plastic bag. She grabbed it, a wave of revulsion rising in her chest. She pulled her hand out and opened her eyes to look at the evidence of betrayal lying in her palm, a bag of heroin. She didn't know for sure, but she had seen enough TV shows and health class videos at school to recognize the deadly danger contained in that deceptively pure white powder. This stuff could destroy her grandmother's life. What should she do with it? Throw it in the trash? Flush it down the toilet? No, that wouldn't work. If the police came to search, they might find it. Her father had said they would find it. That meant they would be thorough. It had to disappear completely, without a trace. An idea sparked in Lily's mind. The backyard. There was an old oak tree in the corner of the garden, its roots gnarled and thick, creating countless nooks and crannies. No one, not even Grandma, ever paid much attention to that spot. But first, another plan began to form in her quick, sharp mind. If she simply made the drugs disappear, when the police came and found nothing, her father would know something was wrong. He'd get suspicious. He'd be on his guard, and maybe he'd do something even worse. No, she needed his plan to fail spectacularly. She needed a decoy. Quick as a flash, Lily ran to the kitchen. She opened the pantry, her eyes scanning the containers. Sugar, salt, baking powder. Aha! There it was. All-purpose flour. She took down the container of flour, along with a clean, small zip-top bag from a drawer. She carefully spooned a measure of flour into the new bag, trying to estimate the weight and shape to match the bag of heroin. Her hands were steady now. They moved with the precision and efficiency of a surgeon. Adrenaline was coursing through her veins, chasing away all fear, leaving only intense focus. When she was done, she placed the two bags side by side on the kitchen counter. They looked nearly identical. A perfect substitute. Holding the real bag of heroin, Lily crept to the back door and unlocked it. The cool midday air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp grass and soil. She glanced up at the window of the study upstairs. Still no movement. Good. She ran across the lawn to the old oak tree. Using her fingers, she dug a small hole in the moist earth under a large root. She placed the bag of drugs inside, then carefully covered it with dirt, scattering some dry leaves on top for camouflage. Finished, she stood up, brushed the dirt from her hands, and ran back inside, making sure to lock the back door behind her. Back in the entryway, she took the fake bag of flour and gently placed it back into the pocket of her grandmother's wool cardigan. Perfect. Now, when the police came, they would find the evidence, but it would be harmless, a cruel joke on her father. But that still wasn't enough. Lily knew that the word of a 15-year-old girl wouldn't carry any weight against an adult, especially her own father. She needed proof, undeniable proof. She ran into the living room and grabbed her smartphone. It wasn't the newest model, just an old one her grandmother had given her, but it had all the necessary functions. Lily opened the voice recording app. She knew how to use it. She'd used it before to record lectures at school. She checked the memory, plenty of space. Then another smart idea came to her. If something happened to the phone, the evidence would be lost. She needed a backup. She quickly went into the settings and enabled the feature that automatically backed up audio files to her cloud account. Now, anything she recorded would be safely stored elsewhere. Next, she needed the perfect hiding spot for the phone. She needed a place that could clearly capture sound from the living room and entryway, but was completely hidden from view. Her eyes scanned the room. On the bookshelf? Too obvious. Under the sofa? The sound would be muffled. Then she saw it. The potted fern on a small stand in the corner of the living room. The plant was lush and overgrown, its green fronds draping down, nearly obscuring the stand. The location had a clear line of sound to both the front door and the seating area. Perfect. Lily started the recording. The phone screen went dark, but the microphone remained active. She carefully slipped the phone between the fern's leaves, adjusting the angle slightly, so the tiny front-facing camera, though she wasn't planning to film, was pointed toward the center of the room. She took a few steps back to check her work. The black phone disappeared completely into the shadows and the green of the leaves. No one would ever notice it. Her work done, Lily felt a wave of exhaustion hit her. Her heart was still racing, but the anger and adrenaline were beginning to subside, leaving a tired emptiness in their wake. She went back to the sofa, curled up under the blanket, and this time, she really closed her eyes. She had done everything she could. She had planted the seeds of resistance. Now, all she could do was wait. Wait for her father's twisted play to begin, and wait for her moment to pull back the curtain on the truth. Upstairs, I finally finished my cleaning. Tom's study was now spotless and tidy. I felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. I went downstairs, planning to make a light lunch. As I passed through the living room, I saw Lily sleeping soundly on the sofa. Her face looked so peaceful, her breathing even. I smiled, tiptoeing past so as not to wake her. Poor thing, I thought to myself. She must have been exhausted. I didn't see the tension hidden behind her closed eyelids. I didn't sense the earthquake that had just shaken her world to its foundations. I, a nurse who could read the faintest vital signs, was completely blind to the tempest raging in the soul of my own precious granddaughter. The afternoon passed in an almost eerie calm. Lily woke up around 2 o'clock. She said she was feeling much better. I made us a late lunch of chicken soup and toast. We watched an old black and white movie on television together, one of those 1,940 seconds romantic comedies that we both loved. Lily snuggled up next to me on the sofa, and in those moments, I almost forgot about my morning worries. She seemed to be herself again, laughing at the witty dialogue in the film. But if I had been paying closer attention, I might have noticed the subtle differences. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She held my hand a little tighter than usual, as if seeking reassurance. And every now and then, her gaze would drift to the fern in the corner of the room, just for a second, before quickly looking away. But I didn't notice. I just saw my little granddaughter needing some comfort, and I was more than happy to give it to her. As dusk began to fall, painting the Chicago sky with brilliant streaks of orange and purple, a vague sense of unease returned to me. A summer storm was brewing. Dark clouds were rolling in from Lake Michigan, and the first gusts of wind began to blow, making the leaves of the oak tree in the yard rustle. I got up to close the windows. The air had become heavy and humid, as if holding its breath before an explosion. At 7 o'clock, as I was preparing a simple dinner, the doorbell rang. I was a little surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. Lily, who was sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework, looked up, her eyes wide with a flash of panic. "Who is it, Grandma?" Her voice was unnaturally tense. "I don't know, honey." I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the door. Looking through the peephole, my heart sank. It was Michael. He was standing on the porch, huddled in a thin jacket, despite the humid air. He looked even worse than how Lily would later describe him to me. His face was pale, his stubble was patchy, and his hair was damp from the first few drops of rain that had begun to fall. His eyes were wild, darting back and forth to the street as if he were afraid of being followed. He didn't look like my son. He looked like a fugitive. I opened the door. "Michael, what are you doing here at this hour? It's about to pour." He brushed past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. "I need to talk to you, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. He ran a hand through his wet hair, leaving damp streaks on the oak floor I had just polished this morning. "Of course, son. Have you had dinner? I'm not hungry." He cut me off, a hint of irritation in his voice. He walked straight into the kitchen, where Lily was sitting. Seeing his daughter seemed to startle him. "Lily, why are you home?" I wasn't feeling well," Lily mumbled, not daring to look her father in the eye. She kept her head down, staring at her textbook. "Oh," Michael said, looking flustered. He clearly hadn't anticipated Lily's presence. His plan had a small wrinkle. He walked over to the table and placed a hand awkwardly on his daughter's shoulder. "Well, you should go up to your room and rest then." "It's okay," Lily replied, her voice still directed at her book. "I'll just sit here with Grandma." I could feel the tension in the air. It was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Something was very, very wrong. "Well then." Michael turned to me, trying to force a smile that only made his face look more contorted. "We'll talk here. Mom, please sit down." I sat in the chair across from him. Lily remained perfectly still, pretending to be absorbed in her homework, but I knew she was hanging on every word. And in the living room, nestled in the fern, a tiny microphone was also listening, ready to record every sound. Michael took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage for a well-rehearsed speech. He reached across the table and took both of my hands in his. His were cold and clammy. "Mom," he began, his voice now taking on an earnest, almost pleading tone. "You know how much I love you, right? You and Lily are everything I have in this world." I remained silent, looking directly into my son's eyes. I wanted to believe those words. Lord, how I wanted to believe them. But his eyes didn't say that. They held no warmth, no sincerity. They only held a wild desperation and a cold calculation. "I know I've made you worry lately," he continued, squeezing my hands tighter. "Work hasn't been good, and I've made some bad decisions. But I've found a way out, Mom. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to fix everything." I still said nothing. I let him perform his play. "It's an investment deal, real estate. A friend of mine found a sure thing, but I need capital. I need $75,000. Immediately." He said the number as if he were afraid to breathe the words. Finally, I spoke. My voice was so calm and cold it surprised even me. "Michael, you don't have a penny to your name. Why on earth are you thinking about investing in real estate?" "That's why I need your help," he said, his voice rising slightly. "This house, you could take out a mortgage on it, just for a short time. I promise, just 6 months, and I'll pay you back with interest. Double. I swear it, Mom. This is my chance to make up for all my mistakes, to provide for Lily properly." He had mentioned Lily, a dirty trump card. I gently pulled my hands away from his. "Michael, I was a nurse for 40 years. I've cared for gamblers, for addicts, for people who made bad decisions. I am not a fool." The desperation in his eyes was replaced by a flash of anger, but he quickly suppressed it. "You don't understand," he pleaded. "This isn't gambling. This is a real opportunity. Don't you trust me?" "I trust that you are in a world of trouble," I said, my voice unwavering. "I trust that you are lying to me, but I will not mortgage this house. This is your father's legacy, and it is my granddaughter's safe haven. I will not risk it on an empty promise." A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Outside, the rain began to fall in sheets, lashing against the window panes. A jagged bolt of lightning tore across the night sky, followed by a deep rumble of thunder. Michael shot to his feet, the legs of his chair scraping harshly against the floor. The mask was gone from his face now. All that was left was raw anger and bitterness. "It's always the same," he snarled. "You never believe in me. You always think I'm a failure. Dad's house, Dad's legacy. What about me? Am I nothing in this house? Don't you dare bring your father into this." My voice finally broke, filled with righteous anger. "Your father worked his whole life for this house. He would never have thrown it away on some vague opportunity." "Fine!" Michael shouted back, his hands clenched into fists. "Keep your damn legacy. Keep your pride. You'll regret this, I promise you." With that, he spun around and stormed out of the kitchen, knocking over a chair on his way. He didn't even glance at Lily, who was huddled at the table, her face as white as a sheet. He threw open the front door and ran out into the rain and the darkness, slamming it shut behind him. The sound of the slam echoed through the house, a sound of finality. I sat stunned in my chair, my whole body trembling. His final threat, "You'll regret this," bored into my mind. Those weren't just angry words, it was a declaration, a warning of what was to come. Lily got up and came to my side. She didn't say a word, just quietly wrapped her arms around me. I hugged my granddaughter tightly, feeling her small body trembling too. We just stood there in the middle of the kitchen, while the storm outside and the storm in our hearts raged on. After Michael stormed out, a heavy silence fell over us, more suffocating than the humid, pre-storm air. The sound of the rain against the windows became the only noise, a frantic soundtrack to the fear that was seeping into every corner of the house. I remained frozen, my arms wrapped tightly around Lily, trying to draw strength from my little granddaughter, not knowing that she was the one who was actually protecting me. "Grandma," Lily whispered into my shoulder, her voice trembling but with a strange clarity. "Don't be scared. I'm here." Those simple but powerful words pulled me out of my stunned state. I took a step back, my hands still on her shoulders, and looked deep into her clear brown eyes. I saw in them not just fear, but determination, a sudden maturity that seemed to have blossomed in just a few short hours. "Lily, do you know what's going on?" I asked, a terrible feeling beginning to creep into my mind. "What your father said, that wasn't an empty threat." Lily took a deep breath. It was time. She couldn't hide it from me any longer. "Grandma, you need to sit down. I have to tell you something really important." We sat on the sofa in the living room. Outside, the thunder and lightning were incessant. The flashes of blue-white light periodically tore across the sky, casting strange, dancing shadows on the walls. Lily began to talk. She told me everything, her voice hesitant and broken at first, but growing steadier and more certain as she went on. She told me about faking her illness, about seeing her father sneak into the house at midday. She described Michael's actions, the way he planted a bag of white powder in my cardigan, with chilling detail. Then she recounted the phone call, word for word, everything she had overheard, about the debt, the plan to call the police, the plot to take the house. I listened, a roaring in my ears, my body turning ice cold despite the humid air. Every word from Lily was like a shard of broken glass digging into my heart. No, it couldn't be. This had to be a mistake, a nightmare. Michael, my baby boy, could not do something so monstrous. He could be weak, a gambler, a liar, but not a monster willing to send his own mother to prison. "No, Lily, you must have misheard," I stammered, trying to cling to one last fragile thread of hope. "Your father. He's under pressure, No, Grandma." Lily cut me off, the firmness in her voice silencing me. I heard every word. Then, as if to prove her point, she continued. She told me what she had done. About how she had secretly taken out the bag of heroin, replaced it with a bag of flour, and hidden the real evidence under the old oak tree. She told me about placing her phone in the fern to record everything. I stared at her, my mouth agape in astonishment. My 15-year-old granddaughter, the child I had always seen as a delicate flower in need of protection, had single-handedly executed a sophisticated and courageous counterplan. While I was drowning in denial, she had been fighting back. "I recorded the conversation with Dad just now," Lily said, looking me straight in the eye. "And I wrote down everything he said at noon, too." The truth, naked and cruel, crashed down on me like an avalanche. There was no room left for doubt. This was real. My son had betrayed me. He had planned to destroy my life. The pain hit me, a real physical pain, as if someone were slowly tearing open my chest with a dull knife. Tears started to flow, hot and uncontrollable. I buried my face in my hands, my body shaking with silent sobs. Lily said nothing more. She just sat there, quietly placing a small, warm hand on my back, patting it gently. In that moment, our roles seemed to have reversed. She became the adult, the protector, and I was just a heartbroken old woman. We sat like that for I don't know how long. Time seemed to stand still. The rain still raged outside, and the grandfather clock ticked on, indifferent. Gradually, my sobs subsided, leaving behind only an empty void and a bone-deep chill. I lifted my head and wiped my tears. "What time is it, honey?" Lily glanced at the clock. "It's almost 9, Grandma." 9 o'clock, the fateful hour Michael had set. Something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, but it was pushed down, making way for a different emotion. It was the cold, clear-headed focus of a head nurse facing an emergency. There was no more time for crying or self-pity. It was time to act. "All right," I said, my voice surprisingly steady now. "Listen to me, Lily. When they get here, you let me do the talking. You sit right here, look scared, but don't say a word unless they ask you a direct question. Just let things play out. You've done so well, my love. You've given us a fighting chance. Now it's my turn." Lily nodded, absolute trust shining in her eyes. We waited. Every second stretched into an eternity. I tried to breathe deeply, to calm my racing heart. I went over everything in my head. The bag of flour was in the pocket. The recording was safe. Our story was solid, but a nagging fear remained. Would they believe us? Would the word of an old woman and a teenage girl be enough to stand against a calculated plot? And then it came. First, a distant siren, faint against the sound of the rain. Then it grew louder and louder, a piercing, menacing sound, drawing closer. My heart felt like it stopped. Flashing red and blue lights began to sweep across the living room window, painting ghostly streaks on the walls. The siren abruptly cut off right in front of our house. Everything was silent for a few seconds, a silence even more terrifying than the wail of the siren. Then a knock on the door, loud and firm. 3 knocks, insistent, not the knock of a neighbor. It was the knock of authority. I took one last deep breath. "I'm getting the door," I said to Lily, my voice astonishingly calm. I stood up, smoothed down my clothes, and walked to the front door, each step heavy. I felt like an actress stepping onto a stage to play a part I never wanted. I placed my hand on the doorknob, feeling the cold metal. I turned it and opened the door. 2 police officers stood on the porch, the rain beating down on their backs. One was older, with a stern, weathered face but calm eyes. That was Officer Davies. The other was younger, looking anxious and tense. "Good evening, Mrs. Miller," Officer Davies said, his voice low and steady. "I'm Officer Davies. This is Officer Peterson. We received an anonymous tip regarding possible possession of illegal substances at this address. Would you mind if we came in and had a look around?" I looked him straight in the eye, trying to appear cooperative and slightly bewildered, like any innocent citizen would be. Illegal substances? In my house? There must be some mistake, officer. But please, come in. You're getting soaked. I stepped back to let them in. They brought the chill and the damp smell of the storm into the house. "Do you live here alone, ma'am?" Officer Davies asked, his eyes scanning the room. "No, I live with my granddaughter. She's 15. She's in the living room," I replied, gesturing toward Lily, who was huddled on the sofa. Officer Davies nodded. He signaled to the younger officer, "Peterson, you can start in this area." The young officer began his work. He looked under tables, behind curtains. Officer Davies moved closer to me. "Mrs. Miller, can you think of any reason someone would make a call like this about you? Have you had any disputes with neighbors or anyone else?" "Not at all," I answered honestly. "I've lived here for over 40 years. I don't have any enemies." Meanwhile, Officer Peterson had made his way to the coat closet. He opened the door, His eyes immediately landed on the moss-green wool cardigan. The collar must have described it in detail. He took the coat out. My heart was pounding. This was it, the climax of the play. The young officer reached into the coat pocket. He pulled out a small zip-top bag filled with white powder. "Sir, I found something," he said, a note of triumph in his voice. Officer Davies walked over and took the bag from his partner. He examined it closely. I held my breath. He brought the bag near his nose, but didn't inhale directly. Then he squeezed the bag gently between his fingers. His stern face wrinkled slightly in confusion. He opened the bag a tiny bit and peered inside. "Peterson," Officer Davies said, his voice laced with something like puzzlement. "Does this look a little off to you?" He handed the bag to the younger officer. He, too, examined it awkwardly. It doesn't look quite right, sir. And," he hesitated, "it smells kind of like baking flour." A strange silence filled the room. The two officers looked at each other, then at me. The triumphant look on the young officer's face had vanished, replaced by embarrassment. Officer Davies's calm demeanor was now mixed with a hint of suspicion. "Mrs. Miller," Officer Davies said, his tone less formal now, "this is flour." I tried to look as surprised as possible. "Flour? Why would there be flour in my coat pocket? I must have gotten some on my hands while I was baking." The play had been a success. My son's plan had failed in the most pathetic, ridiculous way. But just as a wave of relief began to wash over me, another sound cut through the air, a sound even more terrifying than the police knocking at my door. It was the sound of a key turning in the front door lock, and the door flew open. Michael burst in, his face as white as a ghost, his clothes soaked with rain. He didn't see me. He didn't see Lily. His eyes were glued to the two police officers, searching for a sign, handcuffs, chaos, a victory. But all he saw was confusion and a bag of flour. The moment Michael burst into the house, time seemed to freeze. The storm still raged outside, lightning still tore across the sky, but inside the house, everything fell into a silence as taut as a violin string. The four of us, me, Lily, and the two police officers all turned to stare at the sudden intruder, each with a different expression. I felt shock. Lily felt a mix of fear and contempt. Officer Davies had a look of professional suspicion, and young Officer Peterson was just plain confused. Only Michael wasn't looking at anyone. His wild eyes scanned the room, searching for something he expected, a script that had already been written in his head. He was looking for the image of his mother, weeping, in handcuffs. He was looking for the chaos of an arrest. He was looking for a sign that his desperate plan had worked. But all he saw was a strange, unsettling order. I was standing tall, uncuffed. Lily was sitting on the sofa, not crying. And the two police officers, instead of enforcing the law, were staring at him with questioning eyes, one of them holding a ridiculously harmless-looking plastic bag. The script was wrong, utterly wrong. The confusion on Michael's face quickly morphed into panic. His face, already pale from the rain and fear, was now almost translucent. He was panting, rainwater dripping from his hair and clothes onto the hardwood floor, forming a small puddle at his feet. What's going on here?" he stammered, his voice barely audible over a clap of thunder from outside. "Where are the police? Why? Why did they leave?" He still hadn't registered that the two uniformed men standing right in front of him were the police. In his panic, his brain seemed to be refusing to process information. All he could see was his plan falling apart, and it was driving him mad. Officer Davies took a step forward, positioning himself between Michael and us. It was a protective, instinctual move. "Sir, who are you?" he asked, his voice low and authoritative. It was only then that Michael truly saw them. He blinked, as if waking from a dream. "Police?" He stumbled back a step, bumping into the still open door. You're still here? Why haven't you taken her away?" The innocence of his question was horrifying. It laid the entire plot bare. Officer Davies's brow furrowed. He glanced at me, then back at Michael. "Arrest Mrs. Miller? For what reason?" "For what reason?" Michael practically shrieked, the desperation in his voice shattering his last shred of control. He pointed a trembling finger at the moss-green wool cardigan the younger officer was still holding. That, in her coat pocket. Why didn't you find it? He was digging his own grave, and he didn't even realize it. We did find it, Officer Davies said slowly, his eyes never leaving Michael's, like a bomb disposal expert facing a live device. We found a bag of flour. Flour. The word exploded from Michael's mouth. It contained all the disbelief, rage, and sheer terror in the world. He stared at the bag in the officer's hand, then at me, his eyes full of accusation. "No! That's impossible!" he screamed, completely losing control. He lunged forward, but Officer Davies quickly put out an arm to block him. "It can't be flour! It's supposed to be heroin! I put it there myself!" The entire room held its breath. The sentence hung in the air, clear and undeniable. It was the most perfect confession. A confession spoken by the culprit himself, in front of witnesses, in front of officers of the law. The calm expression on Officer Davies's face was gone. It hardened, his eyes becoming sharp. He understood now. This whole bizarre play, the anonymous call, the bag of flour, it all clicked into place with that one frantic sentence. Young Officer Peterson's jaw dropped, completely shocked by the turn of events. As for me, I just stood there, a cold chill running down my spine. Even though I was prepared, even though I knew the truth, hearing my own son confess his crime so openly still hurt with a soul-numbing pain. It was the sound of the final break. The confirmation that the son I once loved was truly gone, replaced by this desperate, cruel stranger. But Michael wasn't finished. His panic had turned him into a madman, spilling the truth like a broken dam. "I did everything she said," he continued to yell, struggling against Officer Davies's arm. "The bag of heroin, in the pocket. Sandra's going to kill me. Oh God, they're going to hurt Lily." He had said her name again, and this time it wasn't a whisper over the phone. It was a desperate scream in the middle of our living room, for all to hear. That was the last straw. Lily, who had been sitting as still as a statue on the sofa this whole time, suddenly shot to her feet. Her face was pale, but her eyes were on fire. The fear was gone. All that was left was rage and contempt. "Don't you say my name," she screamed back, her clear voice ringing out with steely authority, cutting through the sound of the rain and her father's yelling. "Don't you use me to excuse your own cowardice." Lily's sudden outburst stunned everyone, even Michael, into silence. And in that precious moment of silence, another sound filled the room. It was a voice coming from the fern in the corner. It was Michael's own voice, recorded yelling, "Where are the police? Why did they leave? It can't be flour. It's supposed to be heroin. I put it there myself. The bag of heroin! Sandra's going to kill me! Oh God, they're going to hurt Lily!" Lily had pressed play on her phone. The recording played out, crystal clear, in the quiet room. It was ironclad proof, a perfect echo of the confession he had just made. It erased all doubt, all possibility of denial. The play was well and truly over. Michael stood as if he'd been turned to stone. He stared at the plant, then at his daughter, who held her phone in her hand like a weapon. The panic on his face slowly gave way to a horrifying realization. He had been outsmarted. He had walked right into a trap set by his own 15-year-old daughter. Officer Davies didn't miss a beat. He let go of Michael, but at the same time, he pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "Michael Miller," he said, his voice cold and final, with no trace of hesitation. "You are under arrest for planting false evidence, criminal slander, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The dry, metallic click of the handcuffs snapping around Michael's wrists echoed in the room, a final, definitive sound. It was the end of his plan, the end of his freedom, and the end of our family, in a way I could never have imagined. Michael didn't resist. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. All the fight, the anger, the desperation seemed to drain out of him, leaving an empty shell. Officer Peterson mechanically read him his Miranda rights while Officer Davies held his arm firmly. They led my son away. As he passed by me, he lifted his head and looked at me one last time. In his eyes, I didn't see remorse. I just saw a hollow emptiness. He had lost everything, and he knew it. As the front door closed behind them, cutting off the sight of my son being led to a police car in the pouring rain. I finally allowed myself to breathe. I swayed on my feet, and Lily was there in an instant to catch me. After the door closed, cutting off the sight of Michael being led away, an almost unbearable silence fell over the house. Even the rain outside seemed to have softened, now just a gentle patter on the roof, as if nature itself were holding its breath. It was just me and Lily, standing in the middle of the disheveled living room, in a space that still smelled of rain, fear, and the naked truth. My legs felt like jelly, as if all my strength had been drained away. If Lily hadn't been there to catch me, I think I would have collapsed right onto the floor. She guided me to the armchair, Tom's favorite chair, and gently eased me into it. I sat there, numb, staring at the empty space in front of me where my son had just stood in handcuffs. The image played over and over in my mind, a horrific film reel with no stop button. Lily didn't say a word. She quietly went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and brought it back, placing it in my trembling hand. "Take a sip, Grandma," she said, her voice still hoarse from shouting earlier. I did as I was told, taking a sip of the cool water. It helped to ground me, pulling me back from the edge of shock. I looked up at my granddaughter. This 15-year-old child had, in one night, carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were not. Those eyes, her mother Sarah's eyes, shone with a resilience and a wisdom far beyond her years. "How?" I started, my voice a croak. "How did you do all that?" Lily sat down on the rug at my feet, looking up at me. "I just did what I had to do, Grandma," she said simply. "I couldn't let them hurt you." "But the recording, you knew ahead of time?" "I turned on the recorder as soon as Dad got here tonight," Lily explained. "After what I heard this afternoon, I knew I had to. I just didn't expect it to be so useful." I shook my head, still in disbelief. "You are so brave, Lily, so much braver than me." "That's not true," she said, shaking her head gently. "I was terrified, but then I thought about you, about losing you, and that was scarier than anything else." We sat in silence for a moment. Then, a question, a name, hung in the air, needing to be addressed. "Sandra," I said aloud. "And they. The people who threatened you. What on earth has my son, has Michael gotten himself into?" Before Lily could answer, there was a soft knock on the door. A polite knock this time. We both jumped. I looked at Lily, my eyes wide with worry. Could there possibly be more? Lily got up and peeked through the peephole. "It's the older police officer from before, Grandma," she said. "He's alone." I nodded. "Let him in, honey." Officer Davies stepped inside, holding his wet police cap in his hands. His face was no longer stern. Instead, it looked tired and held a hint of sympathy. "I'm sorry to disturb you again, Mrs. Miller," he said in his low, steady voice. "I just wanted to make sure you were both all right, and there are a few things I think you should know." I invited him to sit. Lily sat down next to me, taking my hand in hers, a silent gesture of support. "Your son, Michael. He's already started talking," Officer Davies said, getting straight to the point. "He seems to be broken. The whole thing has come apart, and he has nothing left to lose." I swallowed hard. "Please tell me." And so Officer Davies did. He recounted the story Michael was telling in the interrogation room, a story of a downward spiral, of weakness and desperation. It wasn't a simple story of greed, as I had thought. It was far more complicated and far more painful. It all started with small poker games with friends after Sarah died. At first, it was just a way to get out, to forget the pain. But the small games turned into bigger ones. He started going to underground casinos in Chicago. He lost. He chased his losses, and lost even more. The debt started at a few $1,000s and quickly ballooned into the tens of thousands. He borrowed from friends, lying about non-existent business ventures. When there was no one left to borrow from, desperation drove him to loan sharks. A notorious outfit in the city, run by a man known only as Frankie Shades. And Sandra Russo, Officer Davies said, wasn't his girlfriend. She works for Frankie. Her job is to manage the big debtors. At first, it's all sweet talk and promises to help. But when the debt hit $75,000 and Michael couldn't pay, her true colors came out. They started with threats, vague threats at first, about how he could get hurt. But when Michael still couldn't come up with the money, they played their final, cruel card. They showed him pictures, Officer Davies said, his voice dropping. Pictures of Lily, pictures of her walking home from school, playing in the park. They told Michael that if he didn't pay up within a week, his daughter was going to have an accident. My heart stopped. I turned to look at Lily, who was staring back at me, her eyes wide with horror. She had no idea she had been a target, that these monstrous people had been stalking her. The plan to frame you, Officer Davies continued, was Sandra's idea. She'd done her research, knew the value of this house. She told Michael it was the only way to get the money fast. Stage an arrest, have you declared legally unfit, and as the only son, he could get temporary power of attorney and sell the house to cover your legal fees. A clean-cut plan. They would take their cut and give him a little something back. Michael hesitated, he added, but Sandra showed him one last photo, a picture of Lily standing right in front of her school, and she said, "You have 24 hours to decide, Mike, your mother or your daughter." And there it was. The horrific truth behind my son's betrayal. It didn't make what he did right. It didn't erase the fact that he was willing to sacrifice me, but it cast his betrayal in the tragic light of desperation. He wasn't a cold-blooded monster. He was a coward, a broken gambler, and a cornered father who had made a terrible, monstrous choice between two people he loved. He chose to protect his daughter by destroying his mother. I sat there, stunned, trying to process it all. A part of me was disgusted by Michael's weakness, by the way he let himself be manipulated. But another part, a deep, tiny part of a mother's heart, felt a pang of profound sorrow. My son had been faced with a choice no father should ever have to make. "So, what happens now, officer?" I asked, my voice trembling. Are they still a threat to my granddaughter?" Officer Davies nodded firmly. "No, ma'am. With Michael's testimony and the recording your granddaughter provided, we have more than enough to bring Frankie's whole operation down. We've been watching them for a while, actually, but never had enough solid proof. Your son, in a way, has just become our star witness. We will ensure your complete safety. There will be a patrol car at the end of your street, 24/7 until every last one of them is behind bars." A small bit of relief trickled through the shock. At least Lily was safe. Officer Davies stood up. "I have to go now. Detectives will be by in the morning to take your formal statements. Try to get some rest, Mrs. Miller. The storm is over." I walked him to the door. After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, looking out into the night, which had grown quiet after the rain. The storm outside was over, but the one inside my heart had only just begun. I turned back into the house, where Lily was waiting. She looked at me, her eyes full of questions. She had heard everything, too. "So, Dad did all that to protect me?" she asked, her voice small and lost. I walked over and pulled my granddaughter into a tight hug. "Yes, honey," I whispered, trying to choke back a sob. But it was the wrong way, a twisted and selfish kind of protection. He chose the easiest path for himself and put the burden on someone else. "But he still loves me, right, Grandma?" That innocent question, a question from the heart of a daughter who still loved her father, broke my heart all over again. "Yes, Lily," I said, the tears finally falling. "I believe he does. It's just that his love got twisted up by fear and weakness, and that's the real tragedy of this whole story." We stood there, holding each other, two wounded souls in the wreckage of a family. The truth was out, but it didn't bring freedom. It only brought a painful complexity, a tangled mess of love, betrayal, fear, and compassion. That night, neither of us slept. After Officer Davies left, a strange quiet settled over the house. It was no longer the tense silence of waiting, but the heavy silence of the aftermath. We went to bed, but sleep was an impossible luxury. I lay in my own bed, staring wide-eyed at the dark ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of chaotic images and emotions. Michael in handcuffs, his desperate voice, Officer Davies's story, and above all, Lily's innocent question, He still loves me, right, Grandma? All night, I wrestled with my own demons. The anger toward Michael was still there, burning like an open wound. The betrayal was an undeniable fact. He had chosen me as the sacrifice. But mixed in with that was a heart-wrenching sorrow. I pictured my son, alone in a cold cell, facing the complete collapse of his life, tormented by fear for his daughter and shame for his actions. He was a villain, but he was also a victim of his own weakness. How could a mother reconcile those two opposing images? How could I hate what he did without hating the man himself? Across the hall, I knew Lily was awake too. I could hear the soft creak of her bed as she tossed and turned. Her world had collapsed as well. The father she loved had done an unforgivable thing, but for a reason she couldn't entirely hate. The complexities of the adult world had crashed down on her 15-year-old shoulders with brutal force. I felt a terrible sense of helplessness. I hadn't been able to protect my son from himself, and now I didn't know how to protect my granddaughter from this pain. Dawn finally arrived, bringing a weak, pale light, as if the sun itself were hesitant. I got out of bed, my body feeling as heavy as lead. I made coffee, a mechanical habit, but its bitterness seemed especially sharp today. Lily came downstairs soon after. The dark circles under her eyes were more pronounced than yesterday. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, not saying a word, the only sound the clinking of our spoons against ceramic mugs. The silence between us was no longer one of shared comfort, but a gulf created by emotions too complicated for words. Just as Officer Davies had promised, 2 detectives arrived at 9 o'clock. They were polite and professional. We sat in the living room, and once again, the horrific story of the previous day was retold. I told my part, Lily told hers. She gave them the phone with the recording and showed them where the real bag of heroin was hidden under the oak tree. The detectives listened intently, writing everything down, not missing a single detail. When they left, a strange feeling washed over me. It was a sense of finality. Legally, the matter was almost settled. Evidence was submitted, testimonies were given, justice would be served. But emotionally, everything was just beginning. The following days passed in a hazy dream. The house on Maple Street, once my peaceful sanctuary, now seemed to be under a dark cloud. Every corner reminded me of Michael, of the betrayal. The chair he used to sit in, the mug he used to drink from, they all became painful reminders. The patrol car parked at the end of the street brought a sense of security, but it was also a public symbol of our family's tragedy. The neighbors started to look at us with curious, pitying eyes. Whispers began to circulate. Lily and I became prisoners in our own home. A week later, Officer Davies called. He informed me that, thanks to Michael's cooperation and the evidence we provided, the police had conducted a major raid. Frankie Shades, Sandra Russo, and nearly their entire gang had been arrested. The threat was completely eliminated. Because of his cooperation, Officer Davies said, "The prosecutor might be willing to consider a lighter sentence for your son. He will serve time, that's certain, but it might not be for too long." I thanked him, my voice devoid of emotion. Lighter. The word sounded like a joke. Was there any lighter sentence for the scars he had left on our hearts? The days turned into weeks, the weeks into a month. Life had to slowly get back on track, albeit a track that had been completely derailed. Lily went back to school. She became quieter, more withdrawn. I knew her friends at school had started to distance themselves from her after the rumors about her father's arrest spread. She was fighting her own battles, alone, and it broke my heart. I tried to find my own rhythm too. I gardened, I read, I cooked, but the joy was gone. Everything was just a mechanical action to fill the time. One Sunday afternoon, about a month after that terrible night, I received a call from the county jail. It was Michael. He was allowed one phone call. I hesitated for a long time before pressing the answer button. "Mom?" His voice on the other end was weak and broken. I didn't answer. "Mom, I know there are no words that can—" He choked up. I could hear him sobbing. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom." "Does your apology do any good, Michael?" I finally said, my voice as cold as ice. "No," he whispered. "It doesn't do any good at all." But I still had to say it. Every night in here I close my eyes and I see your face. I see Lily's face. I see what I did. I'm a monster, Mom. Yes, I said, without hesitation. You acted like a monster. Silence stretched on again. Is Lily okay? He asked, his voice filled with worry. No, I replied bluntly. She's not okay. You destroyed her world. You stole her innocence. You turned her father into someone she both loves and hates. She will never be completely okay again. And that is a sentence you will have to carry for the rest of your life, Michael. A sentence much longer than any time you'll serve in prison. I hung up. My hand was shaking. I had been cruel, but it was the truth. There was no room for false pity anymore. Michael's trial took place 2 months later. Lily and I both had to testify. Standing on the witness stand, recounting the whole story in front of my son, was one of the hardest things I have ever done. He didn't dare to look at me, just kept his head bowed. In the end, the verdict was delivered. Thanks to his extensive cooperation with the police, which led to the dismantling of a major criminal organization, Michael received a sentence of 3 years in prison. A sentence considered light. Sandra and her accomplices received much harsher sentences. The day Michael was taken away to begin his sentence, I didn't go. But I received a letter from him, delivered by his lawyer. In it, he didn't ask for forgiveness. He just wrote that he would use his 3 years in prison to try to become a better man, a man worthy of being Lily's father, even though he knew he might never get that chance. He wrote that he would enroll in every gambling addiction program and therapy session the prison offered. I read the letter, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than anger and pain. It was a tiny, fragile spark of hope, as small as a candle flame in the dark. Maybe my son wasn't completely gone. Maybe, somewhere deep inside that broken man, there was still a piece of the Michael I once knew. I folded the letter and put it in an old wooden box where I kept Tom's things. I didn't reply. It was still too soon. Time passed. Autumn arrived, bringing cold winds that painted the leaves in the garden yellow and red. One afternoon, Lily and I were raking leaves in the yard together. She had started talking more, even smiling occasionally. "Grandma," she said suddenly. Her rake paused in midair. "Do you think, one day, Dad will be okay?" It was the question I had been asking myself every night. I stopped my work and looked at my granddaughter's bright face, a face that still had its youthful features, but was now etched with the maturity of hardship. "I hope so, honey," I said sincerely. "People can change, Lily. Sometimes they have to hit rock bottom before they can find their way back up." I walked over and brushed a dry leaf from her hair. "But more importantly, we're okay, don't you see? We're still here. We survived." Lily looked at me, then around the garden, at our familiar house. She nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. "Yeah," she said, "we survived." In that moment, I realized something. This house, this garden, was no longer the scene of a crime. It was a testament to our resilience. The betrayal had left deep scars that would never fully heal. My relationship with Michael might be broken beyond repair. But from the ashes of our family, something else had been born. It was an even stronger bond between me and Lily, a bond forged in fire and tears. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive Michael. Forgiveness is a long journey, and I was only just taking the first steps. But I knew one thing for sure. We would keep living. We would find joy in the little things. We would plant new rose bushes in the spring. 1 year, 365 days had passed since that fateful night. A year, long enough for the leaves on the old oak tree in the yard to change color, fall, and then bud again. A year, long enough for the surface wounds to close, but not nearly long enough to erase the scars etched deep in our souls. The house on Maple Street no longer felt like a crime scene. It had returned to being itself, a quiet, peaceful home. But the quiet had a different quality now. It was no longer the quiet of carefree peace, but the quiet of contemplation, of two souls who had weathered a storm together and were now learning to live with what remained. The patrol car had long since disappeared from the end of the street. Frankie Shades and Sandra Russo had faded into names on crime reports, ghosts locked away behind bars. Technically, we were safe. But safety is a relative term. How can you ever feel truly safe when the greatest threat came from your own blood? My life had found a new rhythm, one I deliberately constructed to fill the empty spaces. Twice a week, I started volunteering at a small community clinic downtown. It was a loud, busy, understaffed place that cared for the uninsured, the homeless, the people society had left behind. I went back to what I knew best, taking blood pressure, dressing minor wounds, and listening to stories of physical and emotional pain. I didn't tell anyone there my story. To them, I was just Mrs. Miller, a kind, retired nurse looking to give back, and I liked it that way. There, I wasn't the victim of a family tragedy. I was useful. When I placed my stethoscope on a patient's chest and listened to the beat of a stranger's heart, I could momentarily forget the frantic rhythm of my own. When I soothed a child who was scared of getting a shot, I could momentarily forget the child in my own family who had lost his way. The work wasn't just about giving, it was my medicine, a way for me to reclaim my own value, a value that wasn't defined by my son's betrayal. Lily had changed too. She was 16 now, taller, with the graceful bearing of a young woman. She was still excelling in school, still my pride and joy. But there was a subtle shift in how she interacted with the world. The carefree innocence of 15 was gone, replaced by a cautious reserve, a quiet, observational quality. She had fewer friends than before, but the ones she had were true, the kind of friends who had stuck by her through the worst of it. She became fiercely protective of me. Whenever a stranger knocked on the door, she would be the first to look through the peephole. Whenever an unknown number called the phone, she would advise me not to answer. She had been forced to grow up too fast, to carry the worries of an adult while still a child. Sometimes, watching her do homework under the lamplight, her face focused but her shoulders unconsciously tensed, a sharp pain would pierce my heart. I had wanted to give her a peaceful childhood, but her own family had been the ones to steal it from her. And then there were the letters. They started arriving about 6 months after Michael was sent away. One a month, regular as clockwork. They came from the Joliet Correctional Center, a plain brown envelope, stamped with the prison seal, with Michael's neat, careful handwriting on the front. The first time I received one, my hands trembled. I stood in the kitchen for an hour, just staring at it, at war with myself. Part of me wanted to throw it in the fire, to burn away every last trace of him from my life. But the other part, the mother's part, couldn't do it. I had to know. So I opened it. The first letter was brief, just a few lines. He wrote that he was okay, that he had started the therapy program for gambling addicts. He didn't apologize. He didn't make excuses. He just reported the facts. The subsequent letters grew longer. He started writing about his therapy sessions, about being forced to confront the demons inside him. He wrote about the shame, about the regret that ate at him day and night. He never once asked for my forgiveness. He just told his story, as if he were writing in a journal and I was the only reader. He asked about Lily, simple questions. Does she still like to draw, Mom? Is she having fun at school? He never demanded to speak to her or see her. I read every single letter. After I finished each one, I would fold it carefully and place it in the old oak box, the one where I kept Tom's most important mementos. I never replied, not once. I didn't know what to say. My silence was a wall, a distance I needed to protect myself. But reading those letters was like monitoring a wound from afar, to see if it was beginning to heal. One Saturday afternoon, while I was cleaning the attic, Lily found the box. She was helping me sort through some old containers. "Grandma, what's in this box?" she asked, wiping a layer of dust from the lid. My heart tightened. "Oh, just some of your grandfather's old things, honey." I tried to sound casual, but my voice betrayed me. Lily looked at me, her intelligent eyes seeming to see right through me. She didn't open it. She just set it down gently. "Is it letters from Dad?" I couldn't lie to my granddaughter. I nodded. She sat down on an old trunk, looking at me. "Do you read them?" "Yes," I admitted. "What does he write about?" He writes about his life in there, about his therapy. He asks about you." Lily was quiet for a long time, looking down at her intertwined hands. Do you hate him?" The question, so direct and heavy, hung in the dusty attic air. I sat down next to her. This was the conversation we had both been unconsciously avoiding for a year. How could I answer that? Say yes? But that wasn't entirely true. In the quiet of the night, the image of my little boy with his blonde hair and bright smile still came to my mind. I couldn't hate that child. Say no? But that would be a lie too. How could I not hate the man who was willing to send me to prison, who had terrified his own daughter? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Hate is too simple a word, Lily. What I feel is much more complicated. I looked out the small attic window at the bare branches of the trees, ready for winter. I hate what he did. I hate his weakness, his selfishness, and his deceit with every fiber of my being. That action, I can never forget or completely forgive. I turned back to look at her. But I can't hate the little boy I raised. I can't hate the father who used to read you bedtime stories. Those people still exist, even if only in memory. A person is like a ceramic vase, Lily. Your father shattered his. I can hate the sharp, broken pieces that cut us, but I can't completely hate the original shape of the vase. Lily listened intently, her eyes unblinking. So, will you forgive him? She asked, her voice softer. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe forgiveness isn't about him, Lily. Maybe it's for us. Forgiveness isn't saying that what happened was okay. It was never okay. Forgiveness, I think, is just deciding not to let the anger and bitterness eat away at the rest of our lives. It's putting down that heavy burden so we can walk forward a little lighter. I reached out and took her hand. It's a long journey, honey, and I'm still on that road. Lily nodded, a deep understanding in her young eyes. Me too, she whispered. I'm on that road too. That conversation opened something up between us. The wall of silence crumbled. We started talking more about Michael, not with judgment or anger, but with an attempt to understand, to heal. We acknowledged our pain, but we didn't let it define us. That evening, after dinner, I brought the oak box down from the attic and placed it on the coffee table in the living room. I wasn't hiding it anymore. It was part of our story, a part of the past we had to learn to live with. Life went on. The letters kept coming every month. I kept reading them and putting them away. But now, it didn't feel as heavy. It was simply part of our new reality. A complicated, imperfect reality, but it was ours. That winter, the snow fell heavily. Lily and I built a snowman in the yard, the first time in years. We laughed, real, genuine laughs that echoed in the cold air. And as I looked at my granddaughter, her face flushed from the cold and happiness, I realized that while the ashes of the past were still there, new life was truly beginning to grow. We hadn't just survived, we were actually starting to live again. 2 more years passed, as quick as the blink of an eye and as long as a century. 2 years marked by the changing seasons, by quiet holidays, and by the stack of letters from Joliet growing ever thicker in the oak box. 3 years, Michael's sentence, was coming to an end. The day I both anticipated and dreaded was approaching. During that time, our lives had found a fragile stability. Lily was 18 now, a beautiful and brilliant young woman about to graduate from high school. She had been accepted to Northwestern University on a full journalism scholarship. When I saw the acceptance letter with the prestigious university's seal, I cried. They were tears of pride, of relief, of confirmation that the tragedy of the past had not destroyed her future. Lily had fought her own battle and won. My volunteer work at the community clinic had become an essential part of my life. I found a purpose there, a second family of dedicated colleagues and grateful patients. I learned to listen to their stories of loss, poverty, and illness, and realized that my pain, as immense as it was not unique. Everyone was fighting a battle of their own. It didn't diminish my pain, but it made me feel less alone. Michael's letters continued to arrive. The tone in them had shifted. They were no longer just reports from therapy sessions, but deep, personal reflections. He wrote about understanding that his gambling addiction wasn't just about money, but a way to escape his feelings of failure, the long shadow of his deceased father, and the grief of losing his wife. He wrote that his betrayal of me wasn't just a crazy scheme to get out of debt, but a twisted cry for help, an act of self-destruction from a man who had come to hate himself. He never asked for my forgiveness in those letters, but he wrote that he was learning to forgive himself and that it was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do. I still didn't reply, but the wall of ice around my heart had begun to thaw just a little around the edges. And then, the day came. One morning in June, I received a call from the prison warden. Michael was scheduled to be released the following week. He has excelled in all the rehabilitation programs, Mrs. Miller, the warden said. He's been a model prisoner. He asked if you, or his daughter, would be willing to be there when he is released. I thanked him and hung up. My hand was ice cold. That evening, I spoke with Lily. We sat in the living room, bathed in the warm yellow light of the lamps. "Your father is getting out of prison soon," I said gently. Lily didn't look surprised. She knew the day was coming. She was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window where fireflies were beginning to sparkle in the dusk. "Are you going to go get him?" she asked, her voice calm. "I don't know," I confessed. "I honestly don't know what to do. Part of me wants to go, to show him that there is still a door, even if it's just cracked open. But another part of me is afraid. Afraid that going would be like saying everything is okay, when it's not." Lily turned to look at me, her eyes now holding the wisdom of someone who has seen too much. "Then don't go," she said decisively. "You don't owe him that. Neither do I," she continued. "You taught me that forgiveness is a journey for ourselves, to let go of the burden. I've thought about that a lot. I think I've started to forgive him. I forgive his weakness. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean we have to go back to the way things were. Dad made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences," Lily said, her voice firm. "The consequences that he lost our trust. It's his job to earn it back, if that's even possible, not ours. We don't have to roll out the red carpet for his return." Hearing my granddaughter's words, I felt a surprising clarity. She was right. We had survived, we had healed, we had built a new life from the ashes. To go back to that prison, even just to pick him up, felt like a step backward, a return to the scene of our trauma. On the day of Michael's release, Lily and I didn't go. Instead, we drove out to Lake Michigan. We walked along the beach, letting the cool waves lap at our feet. We ate ice cream and talked about Lily's future at college. It was a peaceful day, a day of conscious choice, a choice to look forward instead of back. A few days later, another letter arrived. No prison seal this time. It was postmarked from an address in a modest neighborhood on the south side of the city. I knew it was a halfway house for former inmates. In the letter, Michael wrote that he understood and respected our decision. He wrote that he expected nothing. He had found a general labor job and was attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings every night. He wrote only one final sentence: "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to prove I can be a better man. Not for you or for Lily, but for me. And if one day you'll allow it, I hope I can show you both." I placed that letter in the oak box, with all the others. My life, my story, doesn't have a Hollywood happy ending. My relationship with Michael wasn't magically healed with a tearful hug. Our family didn't go back to the way it was. Because it can't. What has been broken can never be perfectly whole again. But it's a real ending. I learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn, that unconditional love does not mean unconditional acceptance. Love sometimes requires us to draw hard boundaries, not to punish, but to protect ourselves and those we love. Sometimes the most powerful act of love isn't to shelter, but to step back and let someone face the consequences of their own choices. My relationship with my son is now an empty space, an open question. Will he really change? Will we one day be able to sit down together, not as mother and son, but as two wounded adults, and find some kind of reconciliation? I don't know, and I'm okay with not knowing. One bright autumn morning, a year after Michael's release, I was in the garden, harvesting the last of the season's tomatoes. Lily, home for the weekend from college, was helping me. She had blossomed into a confident, ambitious young woman. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Lily looked at me. I stared at the screen for a moment, then I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Mom?" The voice on the other end was hesitant and trembling, but it was Michael's voice. I was silent for a second, my heart giving a single hard thump. I glanced at Lily. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. "Hello, Michael," I said, my voice calm and steady. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. A tiny, resilient seedling, trying to push its way up from scorched earth. And for me, right now, that was enough. Thank you for listening to the whole story. If you are connected with it, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, drop a comment below with your thoughts or your own story. Let's keep the empathy and sharing going.